A YouTube mechanic in a garage outside London just exposed something the supercar industry has been hiding for decades. Matt Armstrong didn't set out to embarrass Bugatti. He just wanted to fix a wrecked car. But when he started ordering parts and the invoices started arriving, something became very clear. The people who spend $4 million on a Bugatti aren't buying a car. They're buying a trap. And the receipts are now public. It started with a salvage auction. Matt Armstrong wasn't looking for a Bugatti Chiron. He was looking for a project. His YouTube channel had built an audience of millions by doing something most people considered pointless, taking wrecked hypercars that insurance companies had declared dead and bringing them back. A destroyed Ferrari, a Lamborghini with frame damage so bad the dealer had already ordered a replacement chassis. He'd done them all. Each rebuild was a quiet challenge to a system that preferred expensive things stay broken. Then the Chiron appeared in the listings. Here's how rare that is. Bugatti builds roughly 70 to 80 cars per year. Not thousands, not hundreds. 70 to 80. That's a production number so small that the company knows where every single car is. Every Chiron built since 2016 is registered, tracked, and monitored by the manufacturer. When a Chiron enters a salvage auction, it's not supposed to be there. It's a failure in the system. And the system's response is simple: write it off and move on. The insurance company had already done exactly that. They'd paid the claim, assigned it a salvage title, and filed it away. In their calculation, the repair cost would far exceed what the car was worth. A wrecked Chiron, to an insurance actuary, is just a number that doesn't work out. It gets totaled. It disappears. Matt bought it anyway. The purchase price was a fraction of what a healthy Chiron commands. That's how salvage math works. You're buying damage, uncertainty, and a sourcing problem nobody has fully solved before. For most people, those three things are reasons to walk away. For Matt, they were the whole point. His workshop isn't what you'd picture when you hear the word Bugatti. There's no climate-controlled service bay. No team of factory-trained engineers standing by. It's a converted space outside London, modest, functional, the kind of place where you can smell the metal shavings and the hydraulic fluid the moment you walk in. Matt is self-taught. He learned by doing. He built his entire career on the belief that a car is a mechanical problem, and mechanical problems have solutions if you're willing to look hard enough. The contrast was hard to ignore. A $4 million machine, a YouTube mechanic, a workshop that had no business touching either one. But the real problem hadn't started yet. Matt began sourcing parts, not the headline components, not the W16 engine internals or the carbon fiber body panels. Just the basics. Door hardware, trim pieces, fasteners, the kind of parts that on any normal car take 20 minutes to order online and arrive in 3 days. He picked up the phone. He contacted Bugatti's authorized dealer network, the only legitimate channel through which Chiron parts can be sourced. There is no aftermarket supplier. There is no third-party distributor. Volkswagen Group, which owns Bugatti, controls the entire supply chain from production to point of sale. The pricing is not published anywhere. You call, you wait, you get a number, and that number exists in a vacuum. No competition, no comparison, no alternative. Should a car manufacturer be allowed to control who can repair their vehicles after the sale and set parts prices with zero market transparency? Think about that. Because the answer doesn't just affect Bugatti owners. It affects every person who has ever bought a car and assumed they owned it completely. He hadn't even ordered the expensive parts yet. The first invoice, just for basic body components, was already difficult to believe. The first number that stopped people scrolling was a door panel. Not a door. Not a full door assembly with glass, electronics, and hardware. Just the panel. The decorative skin on the inside of the door. On a standard luxury car, a Mercedes S-Class, a BMW 7 Series, that part runs somewhere between $800 and $2,000 depending on trim level. On the Chiron, Matt's quote came back at over $30,000. For one panel, one piece of shaped carbon fiber and leather that exists purely for aesthetics. The comments section exploded. Then came the headlights. A single headlight assembly on the Chiron was quoted at a price that would buy a clean, running 2019 Honda Civic outright. Not a used beater. A respectable, reliable family car. Gone. Traded for one headlight on a vehicle that Bugatti builds at a rate of less than 2 per week. The fasteners were what pushed people over the edge. Clips, bolts, the small mechanical connectors that hold body panels in place. Parts that cost cents on any production vehicle. On the Chiron, individual fasteners were being quoted at prices that made experienced mechanics laugh out loud in replies, and then go quiet when they realized Matt wasn't joking. Here is where the investigation gets specific. Bugatti is owned by Volkswagen Group. So is Lamborghini. So is Audi. The Lamborghini Huracan and the Audi R8 share a platform, the same basic architecture, overlapping supplier relationships, components that come from the same production ecosystem. A headlight assembly for an Audi R8 runs between $1,500 and $4,000 depending on spec. The Huracan sits in a similar range. These are not cheap parts, but they exist in a market where suppliers compete, where aftermarket options develop over time, where pricing has a ceiling. The Chiron shares DNA with some of these vehicles at the component level. The engineering gap between a Bugatti fastener and a Lamborghini fastener is not $28,000 wide. The gap exists because Volkswagen Group has built a closed ecosystem around the Bugatti nameplate where no third-party supplier is permitted to compete. No aftermarket. No alternatives. One channel. One price. Take it or leave the car sitting on a lift. Matt documented all of it. Every quote. Every invoice. Posted publicly for 3 million people to read. But here's what most people missed in the comments. The parts cost wasn't even the most alarming number on those invoices. The parts bill was shocking. The labor bill was a different kind of problem entirely. Bugatti doesn't just control what parts you buy. They control who is allowed to install them. Any repair that touches a Chiron's official warranty, any work that Bugatti will recognize as legitimate, must be performed at an authorized service center. That sounds reasonable until you look at how many authorized Bugatti service centers actually exist on the planet. Fewer than 40. 40 locations. For a car sold to buyers across 6 continents. In the entire United States, a country of 330 million people and more Bugatti owners than almost anywhere else, authorized service locations are counted in the single digits per region. If you own a Chiron in Texas and the nearest authorized center is in California, that's your only legitimate option. You don't negotiate. You don't shop around. You arrange transport for a car that can't be driven, and you get in line. The technicians inside those 40 locations didn't get there easily. Bugatti certification requires completing manufacturer-specific training programs that aren't available to the general market. These aren't weekend courses. They're structured programs that keep the certified technician pool deliberately small. Small supply, captive demand. The labor rate reflects both. At authorized Bugatti service centers, labor runs between $400 and $1,000 per hour depending on location and the nature of the work. Matt Armstrong's rebuild, when mapped against the kind of operations a certified shop would bill for, represented potentially hundreds of hours of labor. Run that math at even the low end of the rate scale. $400 an hour. 200 hours. That's $80,000 in labor before a single part is installed. This is not unique to Bugatti, but Bugatti is where it becomes most visible. Ferrari has faced legal scrutiny in multiple markets over right-to-repair restrictions. The European Commission has opened examinations into closed dealer parts networks across the luxury automotive sector, flagging them as potentially anti-competitive under EU market regulations. Rolls-Royce operates a similarly restricted service ecosystem. Lamborghini sits inside the same Volkswagen Group structure as Bugatti with comparable authorization requirements. The difference is volume. Ferrari builds around 13,000 cars per year. Lamborghini produces roughly 10,000. At those numbers, market pressure exists. Owners complain loudly enough that manufacturers respond. Slowly, reluctantly, but they respond. Bugatti builds 70 to 80 cars. The owner pool is so small, so wealthy, and historically so disengaged from repair economics that there has been zero market pressure to change anything. Matt Armstrong's videos created, for the first time, a public audience for a pricing system that had never needed to justify itself before. This channel covers stories like this, the ones that live inside financial systems most people never think to question. If that's the kind of content you want more of, the subscribe button is right there. Because the labor rate and the parts cost together paint a picture of a car that is extraordinarily expensive to own beyond the purchase price. But that picture only applies if the owner is paying attention. So, who actually owns these cars? Because the owners, it turns out, are not all who they appear to be. The assumption is that Bugatti buyers are billionaires who read every line of the ownership agreement and fully understand what they're getting into. That assumption is wrong. A significant portion of Chiron and Veyron owners didn't acquire their cars the way most people imagine. They didn't wire $4 million from a personal account after careful deliberation. Many came in through lease structures, arrangements where monthly payments replace capital outlay, and the true cost of ownership gets distributed across time in a way that obscures the total number. Others acquired their cars through fleet arrangements tied to brand sponsorships, athlete contracts, and social media valuation deals, where the car is part of a compensation package rather than a personal purchase. In markets like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and parts of Southeast Asia, the Bugatti Chiron functions primarily as a proximity signal. It communicates a specific message about the owner's position, financial, social, and cultural. It's not purchased for the driving experience. It's purchased for what it says when it's parked outside a hotel in Dubai or photographed at a private event in Riyadh. The car is a tool, and tools get replaced when they stop working, not repaired. This creates a specific problem. A buyer who acquired a Chiron as a status instrument through a leveraged structure with little genuine engagement with the ownership economics, that buyer is completely insulated from the parts cost reality until the moment the car is damaged. And when damage happens, the math that was always underneath the surface becomes impossible to ignore. A $300,000 repair bill on a car whose resale value has already declined below its purchase price doesn't just sting. It collapses the entire financial logic of the ownership. Most people will never buy a Bugatti, but most people have bought something, a phone, a car, a piece of tech, where the manufacturer made it nearly impossible to repair without going back to them. Apple, John Deere, your car dealership with its proprietary diagnostic tools. That's the same system, just smaller numbers. The mechanism is identical. The scale is the only difference. The broader pattern is already showing up in insurance data. Write-offs on hypercars have increased steadily. Insurers are now refusing to cover certain Bugatti models for anything beyond agreed value total loss policies, meaning if the car is damaged, they pay out and walk away. They won't cover repair. The unpredictability of Bugatti repair costs has made actuarial modeling on these vehicles nearly impossible. And when the insurance industry quietly starts walking away from a product, it usually means they've seen something the public hasn't seen yet. In 2022, John Deere sat across from the Federal Trade Commission and lost. Farmers across the United States had been locked out of repairing their own tractors for years. John Deere's software systems required proprietary diagnostic tools that only authorized dealers could access. A farmer with a broken tractor in the middle of harvest season couldn't fix it himself. He couldn't take it to an independent mechanic. He had to call a John Deere dealer, wait for availability, and pay whatever rate the dealer set. The FTC called it anti-competitive. Regulators applied pressure. John Deere signed a Memorandum of Understanding in January 2023 committing to open diagnostic access for farmers and independent repair shops. Apple followed a similar path. For years, iPhone repairs outside Apple's official network voided warranties and triggered software flags that degraded device functionality. Under mounting antitrust scrutiny across the US and EU, Apple launched its self-repair program in 2022, giving consumers access to genuine parts and repair manuals for the first time. It wasn't generosity. It was regulatory pressure wearing a press release. The right to repair movement has been winning. Medical devices, consumer electronics, agricultural equipment. Legislative victories have stacked up across multiple industries in both the United States and the European Union. The core argument is consistent everywhere it's been applied. A manufacturer cannot sell you a product and then permanently control every future interaction with that product through parts monopolies and software locks. Bugatti is watching all of this from a very comfortable distance. The automotive sector, particularly the ultra-luxury segment, has remained almost completely untouched by right-to-repair reforms. The reason is blunt. Regulators go where the volume is. They target markets where millions of consumers are being affected simultaneously because that's where political pressure builds, and that's where enforcement resources justify the effort. When a manufacturer produces fewer than 100 cars per year, it doesn't register as a legislative priority. The affected population is too small, too wealthy, and historically too quiet to generate meaningful political momentum. Bugatti and Volkswagen Group understand this perfectly. Their closed-service ecosystem isn't an accident of corporate structure. It's a deliberate architecture that sits in the gap between what regulators care about and what the law technically prohibits. The service monopoly is legally permissible specifically because the scale is too small to attract scrutiny. They have built a system that is protected not by legal exemption, but by irrelevance to regulatory priorities. Then Matt Armstrong posted his invoices. 3 million viewers saw pricing data that Bugatti had never been required to make public. No regulator had created that transparency. No government agency had forced that disclosure. A mechanic with a camera in a London workshop did what years of policy advocacy had not. He made the numbers visible to an audience large enough to matter. Bugatti has not responded publicly, but Volkswagen Group's behavior in the months following the viral attention tells its own story. Bugatti doesn't operate alone. That's the part most people don't stop to consider. Volkswagen Group is one of the largest automotive conglomerates on the planet. Under its corporate umbrella sits Bugatti, Lamborghini, Bentley, Porsche, Audi Seat, Skoda, and several others. Combined, these brands generated revenues exceeding 293 billion euros in 2023. The group doesn't just manufacture cars. It manufactures the entire ecosystem around those cars: parts procurement, distribution networks, diagnostic software, service certification, and dealer authorization. Every layer of that ecosystem is controlled from the same corporate center. This matters because it means the pricing structure Matt Armstrong ran into wasn't a Bugatti decision. It was a Volkswagen Group decision. The closed parts network, the authorized dealer requirement, the restricted diagnostic access, these are group-level policies applied with varying intensity across different markets. Bugatti sits at the extreme end of that spectrum because its volume is lowest and its buyer pool is most captive. But the architecture is the same, one running quietly underneath every brand in the portfolio. The Chiron is not just a mechanical object, it is a software platform. Every Chiron built after 2016 runs on deeply integrated electronic control systems, suspension calibration, engine management, transmission behavior, the active aerodynamics, the rear wing that adjusts in real time based on speed and driving mode. All of it is governed by software that communicates across multiple control units simultaneously. When a component is replaced, even when it is physically installed correctly by a competent mechanic, the system doesn't automatically accept it. It requires authentication. A proprietary diagnostic tool must communicate with the car's control units, verify the new component, and authorize it to function within the network. Without that handshake, the car doesn't work fully. Matt Armstrong hit this wall during the rebuild. Components installed, wiring connected, everything physically correct, and the car still wouldn't behave as it should because the software hadn't been told by an authorized tool through an authorized channel that the repair was legitimate. He had to source access to diagnostic equipment that isn't available on the open market. The process added time, cost, and a layer of complexity that no parts catalog had warned him about. This is not a bug in the system. It is the system. Software lockouts are how manufacturers extend their economic control past the point of sale. The car leaves the factory once. The software requirement means the manufacturer's revenue relationship with that car never ends. Every repair for the lifetime of the vehicle runs through a channel they control. The Bugatti rebuild eventually ran. But the final cost revealed something nobody in the comments had predicted. What the final bill actually means. When Matt Armstrong's Bugatti Chiron finally started, when the engine turned over and the systems came alive in that modest London workshop, the moment should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like evidence. The total documented spend across the rebuild, parts, international shipping on components that don't exist in UK inventory, specialist labor for operations that required expertise outside Matt's own skill set, diagnostic access fees, ancillary materials, climbed to a figure that reframed everything. When you place that number next to the salvage purchase price and then compare both against a repaired car's current market value, the financial logic barely holds together. And Matt Armstrong runs a YouTube channel with millions of subscribers. The rebuild generated views. Those views generated revenue. The content itself was subsidizing the project in a way that no private individual could replicate. Strip away the YouTube income. Remove the audience. Make this the story of a private Bugatti owner who suffered collision damage and tried to restore their car outside the official network. It's a total financial loss. Every time. That is the real story underneath Matt Armstrong's videos, not the spectacle of a YouTube mechanic tackling a $4 million car. The real story is that Bugatti has engineered a product where the manufacturer is the only economically viable repair option that exists. Not the best option, not the most convenient option, the only option that makes financial sense, because every alternative has been made expensive enough, complicated enough, and technically restricted enough to be effectively impossible for anyone outside the authorized network. That's not craftsmanship. That's lock-in, executed at the highest price point in the automotive market, on a product sold to people wealthy enough that the lock-in was invisible until a mechanic with a camera made it public. Wealthy Bugatti buyers aren't panicking because they can't afford a repair bill. Most of them can. They're panicking because of what the repair bill revealed. The car they paid $4 million for, the car they believed they owned completely outright without condition, exists inside a financial and technical ecosystem that Volkswagen Group controls. The software requires their authorization. The parts require their network. The labor requires their certified technicians. The ownership is real, but it comes with walls the buyer never saw in the showroom. Ownership, in the way most people understand the word, doesn't fully apply here. Matt Armstrong just made that visible, for free, to 3 million people, in a garage outside London. Bugatti is the most visible example, but it's not the only manufacturer building this kind of system. The brand that affects 10 times more buyers and uses the exact same strategy is a topic for another video.